Choosing a synthetic watercolor brush is not an easy task, and there are a few things you'll want to consider. In this video, we'll look at 3 of the most popular synthetic round watercolor brushes and talk about aspects that you'll want to consider when choosing your first synthetic brush. Escoda Perla is a very popular brush among many artists, including the watercolor master Joseph Bukvich, who has been recommending Escoda Perla for a very long time. He describes this brush as holding its tip very well and that you can almost draw with it. In the description from the manufacturer, we see that it is a white array synthetic brush, round, pointed, and long. White array fiber is one of the softest and typically used in watercolor synthetic brushes. So the round brush has a very sharp tip and it has a capacity to retain a large amount of paint and of water. My first impression about this brush is that I actually didn't expect it to be so big. I like it, just that in the pictures I imagined it more like the Winsor Cotman for the handle size. I also love that the wooden handle has a varnished finish and it feels like a high quality brush. Indeed, the tip is very sharp, very pointy, and it also holds its shape well. And I think this makes it a very good brush for controlled sharp lines and details. The Vinci Casaneo brush size 0 from the series 490 is a brush that I've been having my eyes on for quite some time now. I've heard good things about this brush, and so I was really curious to see how it actually feels in my hands. So first, from the description of the manufacturer, the Vinci Casaneo is a watercolor brush with long fiber, extra long tip, extra soft synthetic fibers with exceptional elasticity and extremely high color absorbency. The long bristles put it in the category of a rigger brush, and due to the traditional wire binding, this model is more elastic in comparison to standard riggers and is also suited for calligraphy techniques. So my first opinion when having this brush in my hands is that indeed it is a very soft synthetic brush that moves freely. It is harder to control than, for example, the Escoda Perla. The bristles are very soft, and when wet they don't always come back to their original shape. And by original shape I mean this sharp pointy shape. And having such long bristles, it holds a lot of water and pigment, and you can paint bigger areas with it as well as fine details. But keep in mind that when I say fine details for this brush, I mean more spontaneous and uncontrolled details, more suited for like organic shapes. The Winsor & Cotman round brush is one of the first watercolor brushes that I bought. And I bought this brush in the same day as my Winsor & Cotman watercolors, as both of them were from the same collection. So from the manufacturer's description, this is a brush suited for fine detail, lines and washes. It has a traditional and popular head shape for all-purpose watercolor work. It can be used for broad strokes, yet it will also hold a sharp point. So I like this brush and I've used it a lot in many of my works, but what can I say as a first impression comparing it mostly with the Escoda Perla is that it doesn't have such a sharp point and also doesn't hold as much water or pigment. And to be more clear, it has a sharp point, just that the brush has a very abrupt change from the belly to its fine tip. So this sharp point is very small in length and you need to be very careful if you intend to paint only with the tip of the brush. In this section of the video, I'll be sketching with each brush this beautiful decorative street lamp that I photographed in the summer while walking around the public square of the Opera building from Stockholm. This is a quick exercise where I focus more on how the brushes actually feel in practice in my hand, and I try to keep the video around 2 minutes for each brush. So first, the Escoda. As you see, this is not a short handle brush. It is quite big and quite heavy compared to the other two. So I need to find a balance when using it, cause I mostly own short handle brushes. But keep in mind that there is also available a travel version of this brush that is short handled, and I imagine that it's also lighter in weight. Not sure cause it's metal and I don't actually own one. But let me know if you have one and how it feels for you. And now let me tell you a little bit more about synthetic brushes. So a synthetic brush usually holds less water compared to a natural hair brush. For example, the Squirrel Petite Gris Pure. This means that this type of brushes are not so suitable for the big initial washes of a painting, cause usually you start by painting the big washes with a soft natural hair brush that holds a lot of water, and then after that layer dries, you continue by painting the second layer or wash with a synthetic brush. Of course, it depends from case to case. This is just a general example, don't take it as a rule. And synthetic brushes are also more stiff, so they hold their point better and you have more control over how the point of the brush moves. So if you want to use really thick pigment directly from the tube, then a stiff synthetic brush is the best. Now, I'll be painting the same street lamp with a Vinci Casaneo brush, and as you see, this brush is smaller, thinner and lighter compared to the Perla, because it is a short handle brush and the handle is made out of plastic. In order to get thin control lines, I don't need to keep it so close to the ferrule as the Escoda, simply because it's lighter. And it is very elastic, it easily bends and holds its shape quite well. Just that when it's very moist, the tip loses its shape a little bit, as the fibers are very soft. It feels a little bit like a natural hair brush, for example, my Raphael Petite Gris Pure. If you use the whole length of the belly, you can get very wide brush strokes, and the fact that it holds a lot of water also helps to get nice, full, continuous marks. The brush feels quite free, and we have to remember that it is a rigger brush in the end. A rigger brush is a brush that has much longer hair than the other brushes, and it is sometimes called a liner. Usually, they are much thinner compared to this Casaneo brush. Here comes a picture with my Winsor Cotman rigger brush. On some websites, the term rigger is not a part of the name of this brush, of the Casaneo, but on the Da Vinci website, it is part of the description. Rigger brushes are best for painting long, fine lines, especially when you paint with speed. For example, I usually use rigger brushes when painting the electricity cables of the street poles. Now let's move to the Cotman watercolor brush. With this brush, you are also able to get thin and wider strokes. Just that the wide strokes don't get so wide as with the other two brushes. This is also a short handle brush, so it has a very light weight. And I have this brush for maybe 2 years now, and I've used it quite often at the beginning, but not so much recently. I think it's a good, decent brush, but there are a few things that I don't like about it anymore, and that's why I haven't really used it so much recently. I think this is one of the most popular brushes beginners buy when just starting. At least this is how it was for me. And I actually had to glue back the ferrule part of the brush to the handle, because they weren't sticking together anymore. The brush also doesn't hold the shape of the tip so well. The fibers are soft and they change their form when moist. I mean, you can still get quite thin strokes with it, just that you have to be careful because the actual tip is very short. As you see, the brush doesn't hold as much water as the first two. I had to recharge the brush a few times to paint the background area, the wall behind the street lamp. And this brush is also the cheapest of all the brushes, so in a way it's normal that the quality is a bit lower. In general, about round pointed brushes, the thing with them is that they hold a lot of pigment and water in their belly, and they release it through the very small area of the tip. Sometimes the tip of the round brushes is compared to the beak of a bird, because the pigment is released only through the sharp tip. If you take for example a flat brush, the pigment is released through its whole width, so not only through one point. The bottom line is that you can get the job done with any of these brushes. As you see, the final sketches are quite similar, but there are differences in the way they feel in the hand and how precisely you can actually draw with each of them. Between the Escoda and the Winsor Cotman, I prefer the Escoda. The Da Vinci Casaneo is also very nice, but I feel like it has its own category, so it's hard to choose one from the three. And being so much longer, it's more suitable for when you need less control. In the comments below, let me know if this video helped you understand more about synthetic brushes and what are your favorite brushes. Also, if you've changed your opinion over time about some of the brushes you've used. If you haven't already, don't forget to download my free PDF with amazing watercolor artists and podcasts that will inspire you to create better architecture watercolor paintings. I discovered these artists over a long period of time, and I really wish I knew about some of them earlier in my journey. If you have any questions, don't forget that you can always drop me an email. That's it for today. See you in the next video.